The first warning didn't come as a letter. It came as a fish. Logan Matthews stood barefoot in his bathroom, staring in disbelief at the silver-scaled creature flopping weakly in the bottom of his toilet bowl. The desert sun hadn't even broken the ridge yet, but there it was, something straight out of a nightmare or a backwoods prank show. At first, he thought maybe his irrigation pond had backed up, or some coyote had played fetch with nature's worst idea. But when he turned on the faucet in the kitchen, the real horror revealed itself. Nothing. Not even a sputter. Just a wheeze and a hollow metallic rattle. He rushed outside, boots barely laced, still wearing a shirt with a fire department emblem faded by a decade of sun. The cattle troughs were empty. His tomatoes wilted like forgotten laundry. Even his 2 German shepherds circled the birdbath, tongues lolling, eyes wide like they'd stumbled onto the last oasis in Arizona. Then he saw it. A white envelope taped with surgical precision to his front gate. Watermarked with the HOA seal and typed in a font so cheerful it felt like a mockery of his thirst. The message was short and brutal. Water access suspended pending compliance with Green Space Harmony Protocol. Thank you for your understanding. Karen Whitmore, HOA Chair. No prior notice. No hearing. No discussion. Just dry. Logan had dealt with HOA power plays before. He lived through passive-aggressive fines for the color of his barn, noise complaints about his cattle at dawn, and even a laughable warning when a kid's birthday party balloon drifted onto community property. But this was war. And Karen Whitmore had just drawn first blood. She had her sights set on Logan's land, 60 acres of dry brush, livestock, and history passed down from his grandfather, a World War II vet who believed in 2 things, self-reliance and not taking crap from anyone. Karen wanted that land for what she called a community sustainability hub. Logan called it a vanity project with benches and wind chimes. The water shutoff wasn't about grass or regulations. It was about leverage. Starve the man, soften the resistance, and buy him out cheap. Only Karen hadn't counted on one thing. Logan didn't break. He built. He called Jonas Bell, an old friend from the Fire Academy days who now ran an off-grid solar consultancy. Jonas had gone full prepper after retiring, building survival systems for ranchers, libertarians, and the occasional celebrity doomsday bunker. When Logan explained the situation, Jonas didn't even pause. Time to pull the sun out of the sky and send it through your pipes, he said with a grin. You got shovel hands, right? By nightfall, the plan was sketched on the back of a feed bag in Logan's barn. Solar panels, rainwater collection backups, a deep aquifer pump system running on its own circuit, separate from the HOA's outdated infrastructure. All legal. All under Logan's deeded property lines. All invisible. Logan's barn became a covert ops base. They worked in shifts, hiding the trenches under wildflower patches and planting fake sprinklers to throw off the HOA drones. When Karen sent a board rep by just to check in, Logan handed them a crayon-drawn landscape plan labeled Zen Bird Garden, compliant with Section 8.4. It worked. But Logan wasn't done. He started digging deeper, not just into soil, but into law. A week later, over cold beers and burritos, Jonas pulled up the water rights lease registry. What they found made Logan spit half his beer across the barn floor. The HOA didn't own the water. They leased it from a third-party municipal water broker whose contract was due to expire in 45 days. Logan didn't hesitate. He made a call, booked a meeting, and drove straight to the county office with a check and a copy of his aquifer rights. By the time he walked out, he'd submitted the first and only bid to take over the lease for the next 10 years. It wasn't sabotage. It was strategy. And Karen? She didn't know yet that her control valve was about to be ripped out by the roots. By day 10, the solar pump hummed like a sleepy bear under the morning sun. Water flowed into Logan's underground cisterns. His crops revived. The dogs ran through misters like kings of the prairie. And across the fence line, the HOA's community garden sat dry and cracking, its once green shrubs now brittle ghosts. Logan didn't gloat. Not yet. But every time he sipped iced tea under his porch awning and saw Karen's golf cart cruise past, clipboard in hand, sunglasses big enough to signal satellites, he smiled. Because the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The desert had a way of testing resolve. Logan knew this all too well. Arizona's dry season didn't just parch the earth, it exposed cracks in everything, in pipelines, in plans, and in people. And as the sun scorched the horizon each morning, Logan could feel something else heating up beyond the baked soil, Karen Whitmore's desperation. For 2 weeks, she hadn't made a move. No inspections. No warnings. just the eerie silence of a queen without a throne. Logan assumed she was regrouping, maybe plotting her next bureaucratic offensive. He wasn't wrong. It came in the form of a letter, dropped off in person by a board member who looked more like a frazzled PDA dad than an HOA enforcer. Logan opened the envelope with care, as if it might be laced with glitter or condescension. It was an invitation, Karen's olive branch, dipped in poison. We cordially invite you to co-host the 3rd annual Verde Spring Sustainability Showcase. The letter went on with flowery prose about community unity, bridging rural and suburban perspectives, and, most tellingly, temporary restoration of water services to support event preparations. Logan could practically smell the desperation radiating off the ink. It wasn't about sustainability. It was about optics. Karen had a mayor to impress, a re-election to prep for, and a photo op that required rolling hills, happy goats, and just enough rural charm to make HOA voters forget about last month's water scandal. Logan didn't decline. That would be too easy. He smiled, nodded, and sent back a polite RSVP, along with an edited version of the agreement that included a new clause. All use of private land and resources shall be compensated at standard commercial utility rates, pending legal review and approval. It passed through the board without scrutiny. Karen had either missed it or assumed Logan wouldn't have the nerve to enforce it. Oh, how wrong she was. In the days leading up to the festival, Logan and Jonas fortified the system. Not just the physical pipes and panels, but the legal armor too. Every drop of water pulled from his aquifer was locked. Every solar watt tracked. They even installed a hidden bypass valve beneath a false shed wall, just in case. Meanwhile, Karen was in full event planner mode, micromanaging everything from hay bale arrangements to which side the mayor's SUV would park on. She'd hired a PR intern from the local college, rented a dozen white tents, and even had a banner printed with the words, "One community, one future." The irony was lost on her, but not on Logan. The morning of the event dawned with theatrical timing, cool breeze, clear sky, and not a single cloud to challenge the sun's dominance. SUV after SUV rolled into Logan's property, crunching gravel and expectations under their tires. Golf carts buzzed like confused bees, ferrying HOA members who had never set foot on dirt unless it was part of a resort spa. Karen arrived last, of course, in a powder blue jumpsuit that made her look like a retired astronaut attempting community outreach. She floated around the venue like royalty at a fundraiser, pointing, smiling, nodding, careful to avoid any area that might show Logan's actual contribution. But Logan didn't care about credit. He cared about the punchline, and it came faster than he thought. By mid-afternoon, things started to unravel. The temporary toilets Karen ordered were full. The sinks in the refreshment tent gurgled dry. Sprinkler systems failed to respond. The HOA's irrigation systems, unprepared for the crowd or the temperature, began to sputter and fail. Panic fluttered through the event like wind through loose bunting. Karen's clipboard whipped around as she barked orders into a phone that clearly wasn't connecting. The mayor, drenched in sweat, wiped his forehead and asked where the emergency water plan was. That was Logan's cue. He approached calmly, sipping his tea like the rancher stereotype he'd perfected. Then he spoke. "Mayor, would you like to see how we do sustainable water out here?" Karen's face twisted, but it was too late. The mayor followed Logan through a short walk behind the barn to a small shed. Inside, cool air and the gentle hum of success greeted them. Pipes flowed steadily into an underground tank. Gauges blinked green. The solar panels outside shone like metals in the sun. Logan pointed to the system. "This isn't tied to any HOA grid. It's legal, inspected, and it's been running nonstop for 2 weeks." The mayor's eyes lit up. So did the cameras. What followed was a flood, not of water, but of curiosity. Board members crowded in, peppering Logan with questions. Residents who barely looked at him before now asked if they could tour the setup. One man even asked if Logan would consider helping him install a similar system. Karen tried to interrupt. She raised her voice, waved her arms, even accused Logan of sabotage. Logan didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You cut off my water. I adapted. You needed my land. I offered it. You're the one who forgot to bring your own hose." It was over before it began. The mayor didn't respond. He didn't need to. His expression said everything. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the event's wilted flower arrangements and silent sprinkler heads, Karen was left standing alone, a plastic cup of warm lemonade in her hand and mascara streaking down her cheeks. The real moment came days later, when a clip of the confrontation, recorded by a teenager with a drone and a thirst for drama, hit social media. It went viral. The meltdown. The waterless toilets. The irony of hosting a sustainability showcase on land sustained only by the one-man HOA had tried to crush. Within a week, Karen was facing questions from the board, angry emails from residents, and, most damning of all, an audit triggered by her decision to redirect HOA funds for the festival without proper approval. Logan didn't celebrate. He just went back to his porch, poured himself a glass of sun tea, and watched as his cattle drank peacefully from troughs full to the brim. The war wasn't won yet, but the tide had turned. And the HOA? They were about to learn what it really meant when a man dug in his boots and found water. The ground didn't shake. The sky didn't crack open. But for the first time in years, something unspoken shifted in the heart of Verde Springs. Karen Whitmore was cornered. The clip of her outburst had done more damage than any letter or fine she had ever mailed. It showed not just failure, but hypocrisy. A woman in charge of community resources unable to manage the most basic need: water. The community festival had been her crown jewel, a chance to reassert control after Logan's off-grid stunt. But instead, it became the final blow to her illusion of authority. Within 48 hours, the HOA inbox was flooded. Residents sent complaints, questions, memes. One Photoshop showed Karen trying to water her koi pond with a teacup. Another labeled her Queen of the Drought. But mockery was the least of her problems. What truly ended her reign started with a clipboard. A county inspector named Lynn Devereaux arrived at Logan's ranch the following Tuesday morning. She was tall, sunbaked, and wore boots with more scuffs than a bar bouncer's knuckles. Her only introduction was a curt nod and the phrase, "Heard you built a water system worth seeing." Logan gave her the tour. Every trench, every panel, every buried tank. He handed over permits, inspectors' sign-offs, county approvals, and a copy of the HOA's own bylaws to show he'd never violated a thing. Lynn said little, just scribbled notes and took photos like a tourist with a purpose. Then, just before leaving, she paused at the gate. Her eyes narrowed on something across the street, the HOA clubhouse. "Mind if I check their system too?" she asked. Logan shrugged. "It's public property." She walked over like she owned the sidewalk. That's when it all began to crumble. Lynn noticed something strange. A PVC pipe snaking around the side of the clubhouse, half buried, half hidden behind trimmed hedges. It didn't lead to sprinklers. It led toward Karen's private residence, tucked 2 lots down like a queen's castle on the HOA chessboard. She followed the pipe. At Karen's fence line, it disappeared underground. That afternoon, Lynn filed a formal report with the State Utilities Commission. The next day, she returned, not alone, but with a team of auditors carrying cameras, scanners, and years of bureaucratic suspicion. The audit uncovered more than a water theft. It revealed a system. Karen had been siphoning water from the HOA's irrigation system for over 3 years, an unauthorized connection that conveniently bypassed the community meter and fed her koi pond, her elaborate fountains, and even a private misting system installed behind her patio wall. But that was only the beginning. The inspection revealed infrastructure renovation expenses that had never taken place. Funds meant for drought contingency programs had been funneled into decorative landscaping and luxury outdoor furniture. One invoice led to a landscaping company that didn't even exist. Another traced back to Karen's nephew, who had been hired to conduct pipe repairs that were never needed. The board was stunned. The treasurer resigned the next morning, citing emotional distress and legal exposure. 2 other members followed. Karen called it all a witch hunt, blaming Logan for stirring up division and paranoia. But the evidence didn't care who pointed fingers. The mayor returned for a public HOA meeting, the first one held outdoors, under the shade of Logan's cottonwood tree. Residents sat on lawn chairs, picnic blankets, even buckets. There was no gavel, no podium, just facts. The mayor read from the audit report like it was scripture. Unauthorized water access, misappropriation of funds, falsified invoices, nepotism, manipulation of community resource access for personal leverage. And then came the worst part. Karen's signature appeared on every authorization slip, every check, every permit request. When the mayor paused, someone in the front, an older woman named Ruth who hadn't spoken at an HOA meeting in over a decade, muttered loudly enough for all to hear. "So we paid for her koi pond, huh?" Laughter followed. nervous at first, then growing, then turning into something else, anger. A quiet, focused anger. Not the kind that boiled over, but the kind that plotted. By the end of the meeting, a petition was being passed from hand to hand. It called for Karen's removal not just from the board, but from any position of authority within the neighborhood. Signatures piled up like storm clouds. No one argued. Within 72 hours, it was done. Karen Whitmore was no longer HOA president. The woman who once wielded water as a weapon couldn't even turn on her backyard hose without public scrutiny. But Logan didn't celebrate. He didn't throw a party or blast music across his land. He just walked into his barn, opened the drawer where he kept the original water suspension notice, and slid it next to the lease agreement he'd finalized the week before. He was now the legal holder of the neighborhood's water rights for the next 10 years. Jonas came by that night, carrying a six-pack and a smirk. "Well," he said, cracking open a beer, "you just took down an HOA with a pump and a pipe." Logan smiled. "Didn't mean to. I just wanted my troughs full." They toasted quietly. No speeches. No fireworks. Just two men under a desert sky, listening to the low hum of a solar system that had started something much bigger than water. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about showing people that independence wasn't a fantasy. It was a blueprint, and they had just built the first draft. Logan Matthews never wanted to lead a movement. All he'd ever wanted was to water his tomatoes and keep his cattle from dying in the sun. But something about watching Karen Whitmore pack her coilless bags and leave Verde Springs triggered a quiet realization. They didn't need rulers. They needed solutions. And Logan had one humming in his pasture. It began slowly, like most revolutions do, not with banners or speeches, but with neighbors knocking on his gate. First came Mr. Ellison, a retired librarian who'd once filed a complaint about Logan's rooster crowing at sunrise. He arrived holding a Tupperware of lemon bars and a humble request. Could Logan help him understand how solar-powered water worked? Then came the Johnsons, a young couple new to the neighborhood, tired of the arbitrary fines and rising HOA fees. Their toddler clung to their legs while they listened wide-eyed as Logan and Jonas explained rainwater harvesting and battery backups. By the end of that week, Logan's barn looked less like a ranch and more like a community hub. Charts covered the walls. PVC pipe samples lined the shelves. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years now stood shoulder to shoulder, measuring trench depth and asking about pressure regulators. And leading them all was Logan, not as a president, not as a politician, but as a builder. The HOA board, still shaken from Karen's collapse, was being reshaped. Into the vacuum stepped Earlene, a retired schoolteacher with a steel backbone and a spiral notebook filled with hand-drawn flowcharts. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. But she was the kind of person people trusted without needing a title. She came to Logan's gate one morning holding a pitcher of sweet tea and a simple proposition. "No mandates," she said. "No fines. Just an idea. What if we offer residents the option to connect to a sustainable water system? One they own. One they understand." Logan didn't answer immediately. He sipped the tea, watching a hawk circle above the pasture. Then he nodded. "I'll build it," he said. "But it belongs to them. Not the board. Not me." Earlene smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." They shook hands under the rising sun, and for the first time in years, it felt like a real handshake, one not hiding a knife behind the back. Over the next month, progress moved faster than anyone expected. Logan hosted weekend gatherings, half workshop, half potluck. Jonas drew up simplified blueprints. Teenagers helped dig trenches while grandparents held shade umbrellas and handed out sandwiches. It was messy. It was sweaty. It was beautiful. By late July, 5 homes were fully or partially connected to the pilot system. No HOA grid. No usage quotas. Just sunlight, storage tanks, and self-reliance. Even the mayor came back, this time without cameras, just to walk the land and ask questions about scaling. He left with a folder of data, a dusty pair of boots, and a handshake that meant something. Earlene's monthly newsletters highlighted the progress with pride, featuring photos of grinning neighbors beside freshly installed meters and underground tanks. She even included a thank you column that listed every volunteer by name. The tone of the community shifted. Where once there had been lawn chair spies and whispered fence gossip, now there were shared meals and late-night group chats about pipe fittings. People who had once lived side by side, without speaking, now traded tools and garden produce. HOA meetings became discussions, not lectures. The board stopped issuing fines and started asking for feedback. Something rare was happening. A neighborhood was remembering how to be neighbors. And yet, through it all, Logan stayed grounded. He didn't take the credit. He didn't run for office. He just kept building, kept teaching, kept walking his land every morning, coffee in hand, listening to the soft gurgle of water flowing beneath his fields. Karen, meanwhile, was a ghost. She'd sold her home quietly and moved 2 towns over. Rumor had it she tried to join another HOA board, but was politely declined. Others said she was done with power entirely. Logan didn't care either way. He kept her original note, the water suspension letter, folded and tucked into the same drawer as the receipt for the water rights lease. It wasn't bitterness. It was a bookmark, a reminder of where the real story began. Then came the call from the county. They wanted to study Logan's setup, see if it could be applied in other semi-rural neighborhoods, bring in a few engineers, maybe some planners, and document the results. They weren't interested in politics. They wanted the model. Logan said yes. He didn't want fame. He wanted families like his to never again be at the mercy of a clipboard and a utility shutoff. So he gave them the tour, the numbers, the stories, the community. And when they asked him who designed it all, he pointed at the pasture filled with zip-tie-wielding neighbors, at the wall of Post-it notes inside the barn, and at a teenage girl named Maya who figured out a cheaper way to insulate underground tanks. "This isn't mine," he said. "It's ours." That August, they held a town meeting, not in the old HOA clubhouse, but under the cottonwood tree at the edge of Logan's land. No titles, no agenda, just folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a mic. Earlene gave a quick update on system maintenance and future expansion. Then she handed the mic to Logan, who took a moment to look out at the familiar faces, some sunburned, some skeptical, all watching him with something that looked like belief. He didn't give a speech. He gave a truth. "I didn't set out to fight anyone," he said. "I just wanted to water my land without asking permission. But sometimes when they cut off your supply, you've got to dig deep, literally, and find your own." The crowd didn't erupt in cheers. They just nodded, because they got it. Afterward, they lit a bonfire. Kids toasted marshmallows. Elders swapped stories. Someone played guitar badly, and no one minded. Jonas handed Logan a paper plate loaded with ribs and asked, "You ever think your toilet fish would lead to all this?" Logan chuckled. "I just wanted my tomatoes to stop dying." They clinked beers under the stars. No HOA, no permits, just peace. And beneath their feet, the quiet hum of water flowing, uncontrolled, unbought, and absolutely, irrevocably free. The desert didn't change, not really. The sun still scorched the sand every afternoon. The wind still kicked up dust devils in the low plains. And if you weren't careful, you could still get a cactus spine in your boot by breakfast. But the people? The people had changed. 6 months after the first pipe was laid beneath Logan Matthews' pasture, Verde Springs no longer resembled the HOA-controlled village it once was. It had become something else entirely, something new, and yet older in spirit. Like the kind of town you'd read about in old American novels, where neighbors knew how to build fences and cross them when needed. And the blueprint? It was all Logan's doing, though he'd never admit it out loud. The county had taken notice. Then the state. By early fall, a delegation from the Arizona Office of Rural Sustainability arrived with drones, notebooks, and a film crew. Not to document the scandal, that was old news, but to study the solution. They toured the ranch, spoke to residents, examined trench depth, pump specs, and rainfall collection efficiency. They watched videos of installation days where retirees and teenagers worked side by side. They reviewed Earlene's transparency reports that laid out every screw, valve, and cost like an open book. The report they published called Verde Springs a model for decentralized rural water autonomy. It spread fast, faster than HOA bylaws ever did. Towns in Utah, New Mexico, and West Texas reached out for consultations. Universities asked for case studies. A national sustainability journal featured Logan on its cover. Not his face, but a photo of his pasture at sunrise, panels glowing and cattle grazing in the mist. And through it all, Logan kept his head down. He still fed the dogs every morning, still walked the trough lines with coffee in one hand and a wrench in the other. still fixed the same damn fence post that leaned every time the wind blew from the west. But he also trained others. Curtis came by twice a week now, running technical Q&A sessions in the barn. Jonas helped set up a website where communities could download schematics, cost calculators, even DIY walkthroughs. Erlene, now the official HOA chair, but really more of a community organizer, helped launch the Verde Water Co-op, a resident-owned, nonprofit utility project. Their mission was simple: keep the pipes flowing and the politics out. Membership was optional. Participation was encouraged. And the rules? Made by the people who used the water. By winter, nearly 60% of the neighborhood had at least partial off-grid water integration. The HOA still existed, technically, but its meetings now focused on shared gardens, community repair days, and scholarship funds for kids interested in engineering or agriculture. The old clubhouse was repurposed as a tool library and design lab. Its koi pond, gone, replaced by a native plant nursery that didn't require siphoned water to survive. Logan barely recognized the place, and that was a good thing. He'd never meant to lead, but sometimes when you survive the fire, people ask how you didn't burn. That January, Logan received a formal invitation to speak at the statewide infrastructure summit in Phoenix. A keynote spot, all expenses paid. Fancy hotel, big room, bigger audience. He declined. Instead, he sent Maya, the teenager who discovered the insulation trick, and 2 other residents who'd helped build the system. He told them to speak from experience. Not from plans, not from theory. From the dirt under their fingernails and the sweat on their backs. They came back glowing, holding a plaque engraved with the words, "Innovator of the Year, Verde Springs Community Water Model." Logan hung it in the barn, right next to his grandfather's saddle and the framed copy of Karen's original violation letter. Not out of spite, but as a timeline. A reminder that sometimes oppression plants the seeds of liberty. And sometimes the fish in your toilet is just the beginning. On a warm spring night, nearly a year to the day since the water shut off, the entire neighborhood gathered again under the cottonwood tree. This time, there was no emergency, no crisis, just barbecue, lights strung between branches, and music drifting over the pasture. Kids ran wild with flashlights and glow sticks. Dogs barked. Someone brought homemade ice cream that melted faster than anyone could eat it. Jonas raised a toast, this time not with beer, but with water drawn from the very tank he'd helped install. To Logan, he said, for showing us that freedom sometimes comes in pipes and sunlight. But Logan shook his head. To all of you, I just dug the first trench. That night, as the embers cooled and laughter gave way to quiet, Logan walked the property one last time before bed. The panels reflected the stars. The pump hummed its eternal hymn of independence. And the land, his land, stood green, watered, and whole. No fines, no fear, no HOA threats taped to the gate. Just life. Logan paused by the barn door, hand resting on the wood, and took a long breath. Not because something was coming, but because for the first time in years, nothing was. And that, he thought, was the truest kind of power there was. Years later, long after the pipes had become part of the land and the HOA was just a line item in Old Town records, people still told the story. Not just about Logan Matthews, the rancher who built a solar water system and outsmarted a tyrant, but about what came after. The quiet revolution. The reclaimed community. The proof that control can be broken not with noise, but with resolve. School children in Verde Springs now learn about the water war, not as a conflict, but as a turning point. They walk past the cottonwood tree where the first new vote took place, and some still whisper that it's the only tree in Arizona that drinks hope instead of water. And in a drawer in an old barn, beneath a saddle and a plaque, still rests that single, yellowing letter from a time when a man was told he wasn't allowed to water his own land. It's never been thrown away, because some scars aren't meant to fade. They're meant to remind us where we dug, and what bloomed when we did.